It all began quietly, without any warning or dramatic signs in the sky. People went about their usual days, never realizing that something far away, beyond their imagination, had already started changing everything they knew about the universe. The Global Exploration Alliance had launched two of the most ambitious deep space missions in human history. They were called the 9th and the 7th missions. Both carried brave explorers, skilled scientists, and machines built to survive the endless silence of the stars. They left Earth with cheers and hope, carrying humanity's dream to reach beyond the known and to understand what waited in the dark. For months, everything went perfectly. The ships sent back stunning images of strange planets, glowing dust clouds, and endless stretches of light that looked like rivers flowing through the void. Families of the crew would watch the transmissions every night. Children drew pictures of rockets flying among stars and proudly said they wanted to become space explorers someday. People believed the future had finally arrived. For the first time in a long time, the world felt united under one goal: to discover. Then, without reason, the 7th mission stopped sending data. The last signal came in the middle of a transmission, a simple report from the communication officer saying they had detected an unusual energy field. After that, nothing. The screen went dark. Engineers tried to reconnect, scanning every frequency, but there was only silence. At first, people thought it was a small issue, a communication glitch caused by interference or a solar flare. The crew had trained for every possibility. They were among the best, but days turned into weeks and the silence continued. The media started reporting it, calling it a temporary blackout. Families were told not to panic. Experts said this kind of issue had happened before. Still, deep inside, everyone knew something was wrong. Space was vast, but it was never this silent. Before anyone could find answers, the 9th mission, launched months later to another region, also vanished. One moment they were talking to mission control. The next they were gone. 2 ships, 2 sets of crews, 2 hopes of humanity, wiped out in the same mysterious way. The loss hit the world like a heavy stone dropped in still water, sending waves of fear and confusion across every corner of the planet. In cities, people gathered outside news screens, waiting for any update. The families of the lost crew members filled the halls of the Space Council headquarters, desperate for explanations. Mothers held pictures of their children, fathers stood in quiet disbelief, and friends whispered that something was not right. It was as if the universe had closed its doors. Governments tried to stay calm. Spokespeople repeated that investigations were ongoing. They said they were working with the best scientists to locate the missing missions. But behind closed doors, things were different. Secret reports began to circulate. Engineers and physicists studying the data noticed both missions had vanished near the same uncharted sector of space. There was no sign of explosion or collision. The ships had simply stopped existing in the signal map. The public didn't know it yet, but inside the Global Exploration Alliance, fear was growing. Something out there might not want to be found. A few scientists even whispered that maybe, just maybe, they had reached a boundary, one that humans were never meant to cross. News channels began to speculate. Some claimed it was sabotage by rival nations. Others said it was a cosmic event like a wormhole or a magnetic storm. Social media filled with theories. People argued late into the night about what had happened. The world that once dreamed of exploring the stars was now afraid of them. In the middle of all this noise, one man quietly watched the stars every night from his small observatory on the coast. He had once worked for the Alliance, but had stepped away after disagreements about how fast humanity was pushing outward. He believed space exploration should be about understanding, not racing. When the news broke about the missing missions, he didn't see it as a simple accident. He felt something deeper, an echo of warning in his chest. The universe was vast but not empty. He wondered if it had finally spoken back. The Alliance launched a recovery operation. Satellites, long-range scanners, and deep space probes were sent toward the coordinates where the 2 missions disappeared. Days passed, then weeks, then months. Not a trace was found. No wreckage, no debris, not even a single signal reflection. It was as if the missions had been erased from existence. That silence was worse than any explosion could have been. People could accept loss, but not mystery. Back on Earth, the mood began to shift. Cities that once celebrated launches now avoided looking up at the sky. The night felt heavier, filled with questions. Children who once dreamed of space now asked if the stars could swallow people. Teachers struggled to answer. Scientists gave careful statements avoiding panic, but the truth was simple. They didn't know what had happened. In private meetings, top leaders argued about the next step. Some wanted to cancel all future missions until answers were found. Others believed retreat would make humanity weaker. The argument wasn't just about science anymore. It was about pride, fear, and survival. But amid all the loud debates, one voice stood out. The quiet astrophysicist who had once warned that every discovery carries a price. He didn't say, "I told you so." He simply asked to look at the data. When he studied the last signals from both missions, something strange caught his attention. Right before they vanished, both ships had recorded an identical wave pattern in their sensors. It wasn't natural static or solar interference. It was a pulse steady and rhythmic like a heartbeat, and it matched Earth's own magnetic frequency. It was as if the planet's signature had been reflected back from space, magnified and distorted. The discovery gave him chills. He didn't rush to announce it. He took time to double-check, to listen again, and every time the result was the same. Whatever caused those missions to vanish had somehow echoed the planet's own rhythm. He shared his findings with the Alliance's chief scientists. Most dismissed it as coincidence, but he couldn't shake the feeling that it was intentional. Meanwhile, strange things began happening on Earth itself. Ocean tides shifted slightly out of pattern. The northern lights appeared farther south than ever before, painting skies above cities that had never seen them. Birds migrated in odd directions. Electronic systems in observatories flickered. It was as if something invisible was gently touching the planet, just enough to be noticed. The public didn't hear about these incidents right away. The Alliance tried to keep them quiet to avoid panic, but word slowly leaked through small science networks. People began to wonder if Earth itself was responding to what happened out there. The theory sounded unbelievable, but so did the disappearance of 2 entire missions. Months after the vanishings, a global memorial was held. Families, scientists, leaders, and citizens gathered to honor the lost explorers. The speeches were filled with hope, but behind every word was sadness. When they released the lights into the night sky, thousands of glowing lanterns drifted upward, fading into darkness, just like the ships they represented. The world watched in silence, feeling something larger than grief. It was the sense that humanity had stepped too far, too fast. After the memorial, the astrophysicist stood by the ocean, staring at the horizon. The waves moved calmly, but he couldn't ignore the faint static in his communication receiver, an irregular pulse repeating in perfect intervals. He recorded it, compared it, and froze. The pattern was identical to the one captured from the lost missions. The signal wasn't coming from space now. It was coming from Earth's atmosphere itself. He didn't know what it meant, only that it felt like a message. A reflection. Or maybe a warning. The same pulse that had been heard before the missions vanished was now echoing across the planet. Faint but clear. As if the Earth was speaking in a language no one understood yet. People went to bed that night unaware of the quiet storm building beneath the calm surface of their world. The stars above shone beautifully as always, but for those who paid attention, something had changed. The silence between the stars felt alive, watching, waiting. Humanity had looked too far into the unknown, and the unknown had finally looked back. And somewhere beyond the edge of the mapped universe, in the cold stretch of uncharted darkness, a faint shimmer of light flickered, almost like a response. After the second mission vanished, the world slowly learned to live with the silence, though no one truly forgot. People still looked up at the sky, but no longer with wonder, only with quiet questions. What was once a dream of discovery had turned into a heavy reminder that some answers may not be meant for humans to find. Still, there were those who couldn't stop searching for meaning. Among them was a quiet scientist who had been part of the analysis team. He wasn't famous or powerful, just deeply curious and thoughtful. He believed that the universe always leaves clues behind, no matter how well it hides them. Every mystery, he said, is only unsolved because we haven't looked the right way yet. He began spending long hours in his small research center, going through every piece of data ever received from the lost missions. The numbers, the frequencies, the patterns, everything. His colleagues thought he was wasting time. The signals had ended months ago. But one late night, as he adjusted his instruments and replayed the last recordings again, he noticed something no one else had seen. Hidden beneath the static, faint but steady, there was a strange vibration, a repeating pulse that appeared every 27 seconds. It was not random, not natural noise. It had rhythm, almost like it was alive. When he filtered out the background noise and isolated the pulse, it became clear. The sound was the same frequency as Earth's own magnetic field. The same heartbeat that every compass, every satellite, and every sensor feels from the planet's core. He sat there in silence, staring at the monitor. The pulse wasn't from the ship itself. It came after the ship's systems had already shut down. Whatever had happened out there, it had somehow reflected Earth's own signal back into space. It was as if the universe had held up a mirror to the planet and said, "I see you." The next morning, he took his findings to the Alliance headquarters. The scientists in charge listened politely, then smiled and said it was probably just interference. But he could see doubt in their eyes. They had all felt something strange about this case. No explosion, no debris, no distress call. Only silence and now a mysterious pulse. When he left the meeting, he couldn't stop thinking. If that pulse really was connected to Earth, what did it mean? Was it a warning? A reflection? Or something else entirely? A response? As days went by, he started noticing odd events happening on the planet. Reports came in from observatories around the world. Small fluctuations in the magnetic field were being detected at random intervals, but all of them matched the same rhythm as the mysterious pulse. Sometimes at night, northern lights appeared where they never had before. Over deserts, oceans, even tropical skies. The air would shimmer softly for a few moments and then fade. Some people called it beautiful. Others called it an omen. The scientist began keeping a personal log, recording every event. "It's as if Earth itself is reacting," he wrote, "like something far away is touching the planet through invisible waves." One evening, he was invited to a private meeting with a few senior members of the Alliance. They had seen his reports and wanted to know how sure he was about his findings. The room was small, the walls covered with monitors showing faint blue lights. One of the senior members spoke quietly, saying there were older records, data from the first and second missions that had been classified long ago. Those missions had also passed near the same region where the ninth and seventh vanished. At the time, the early explorers had noticed sudden drops in power and unusual magnetic readings, but the cause was never understood. The missions were brought back safely, yet their reports were locked away to avoid public fear. Now the similarities were impossible to ignore. The scientists realized this pattern stretched across decades. Something in that distant region had been there all along, watching, waiting, and each time Earth reached out too far, it reacted. That night he went home unable to sleep. He stood outside his small house looking up at the stars. The wind was cool and the world was quiet. But in that quiet he felt something, a presence. Not threatening, not hostile, but aware. He thought about how humans always look at the sky as if it's empty, forgetting that emptiness might be full of things beyond comprehension. Over the next weeks, strange phenomena grew stronger. Satellites drifted slightly off course. Some communication systems flickered, showing bursts of static shaped almost like patterns. People started capturing strange sounds on their radios. Slow, rhythmic tones that no station could explain. News of these incidents reached the media, but officials quickly labeled them as technical malfunctions. Still, ordinary people noticed. Farmers claimed their animals behaved oddly during certain hours of the night. Sailors said the sea waves changed direction for no reason. In one mountain town, people reported hearing a deep humming sound coming from underground that lasted for hours. The world was changing in small ways, yet no one could say why. Meanwhile, the scientist kept studying the data, connecting the dots. He began to suspect that the disappearances weren't accidents or attacks. Maybe the ships hadn't been destroyed at all. Maybe they had entered something, a barrier, a field, a dimension, where human technology simply couldn't function. He thought about the pulse again. It was too perfect to be random. What if it wasn't a reflection but a message? What if space itself was trying to speak? As weeks passed, he noticed something new in the data. The pulse had started repeating faster, not every 27 seconds now, but every 25. That change, small as it was, meant the source was getting closer or stronger. He shared this with his colleagues, but they were afraid to admit what it could mean. Then one night, while listening to the low hum of the radio signals, he heard a faint pattern hidden inside the pulse. It was rhythmic, 3 short beats, 2 long, 3 short. He ran it through a translation algorithm and froze. The pattern matched a binary code, the same sequence humans used to send the very first message into deep space decades ago. That realization sent a chill down his spine. It was as if something far away had received humanity's first greeting and was now sending it back, not as an answer, but as a reminder. We heard you. He felt torn between awe and fear. If this was communication, then they had achieved something no one in history ever had. But if it wasn't, then something unknown was mimicking Earth's voice. The next morning, the Alliance's command center buzzed with tension. The readings were undeniable now. The energy pulse was growing stronger, detectable across continents. It was not dangerous yet, but it was spreading. They couldn't hide it any longer. The public began noticing that compasses were off, GPS signals slightly misaligned, and auroras dancing across skies in colors never seen before. Some people called it a sign of hope, proof that humanity had finally reached something greater than itself. Others were terrified, convinced the end was coming. Churches filled and news anchors spoke with trembling voices. Scientists urged calm, but their faces betrayed uncertainty. Amid all the confusion, the scientist sat alone in the control room, staring at the repeating signal. He wondered if this was what humanity had been waiting for all along. Contact. Maybe the universe had always been alive and Earth was only now being noticed again. Or maybe he thought it was Earth itself sending a call to something it had once been part of. Something ancient that stretched across stars. As he watched the signal grow brighter, he remembered an old saying his mentor once told him, "The more we reach for the stars, the more they reach for us." He finally understood what it meant. Humanity had called out and now something had answered. The pulse continued, slow and steady, echoing through the night. Radios picked it up, sensors recorded it, and hearts felt it. No one knew what would happen next, but deep down, everyone sensed that the silence of the universe was over. Far above the clouds, beyond the reach of satellites and telescopes, the same rhythm traveled across space, a whisper between worlds. Something was coming, something that had been waiting for humanity to listen. The pulse that had once been faint was now everywhere. It hummed softly in the background of life, through the air, through the ground, even through the quiet spaces between moments. Most people couldn't hear it, but they felt it. Radios would sometimes buzz for a second. Lights would flicker and phone signals would drift in strange patterns. It wasn't dangerous, at least not yet. But it made everyone uneasy. Something invisible was happening, and no one could explain it. Scientists around the world tried to calm the public, saying it was only magnetic interference or solar radiation. But deep inside, the ones who worked closest to the signals knew that wasn't true. The pulse was repeating with perfect precision, following no natural rule. It carried a pattern almost like a heartbeat or a word trying to form itself. And with each passing day, it grew clearer. The man who had discovered the pattern barely slept anymore. His room was filled with screens, devices, and notebooks covered with strange marks and equations. He wasn't chasing fame or power. He just wanted to understand. Every night he listened to the hum in his instruments and wondered who or what was sending it. The idea that something beyond the stars could be calling back to Earth both terrified and fascinated him. Late one evening, as he sat in his lab surrounded by the soft glow of his equipment, the pulse shifted. It wasn't just repeating anymore. It was forming waves, like layers of sound building on top of each other. He ran the signal through a frequency analyzer and froze. Hidden inside the pulse was something unexpected, a voice. It wasn't human, not clear words, but more like tones forming a slow rhythm. He increased the volume, and for a brief second he thought he heard it whisper. He replayed it again and again, convinced it was his imagination. But it was there, a faint melodic hum that seemed to carry emotion, almost like sadness mixed with longing. When he checked the exact timestamp, he noticed something that made his heart race. The sound had appeared exactly at the same moment the Earth's magnetic field had pulsed stronger than usual. It was as if the planet itself had responded to that distant echo. He reported it to the Space Alliance the next morning. They brought in experts from across the world, linguists, sound analysts, signal engineers, all trying to decode the strange message. Some thought it was a coincidence, a product of overlapping signals. Others whispered quietly that maybe it wasn't just data. Maybe it was communication. Days turned into weeks and the signal continued. Then one night something incredible happened. The pulse suddenly stopped. For hours the world was silent, no hum, no flicker, nothing. Everyone who had been tracking it felt an empty stillness as if the earth had paused to listen. Then just before dawn, a new sound came through, softer, clearer, and unmistakably intentional. When decoded, the sound translated into a simple pattern of light and frequency that formed symbols, almost like ancient writing. The scientists ran it through multiple systems until one translation finally made sense. The message was short, only 3 words. Return what you took. The room went silent. Everyone stared at the screen, unsure how to react. What had Earth taken? From where? The missions that vanished had gone far beyond known space, to places no one had ever explored before. Could it mean something one of those crews found? Something they brought back without realizing what it was? The Alliance leaders called for a private meeting. No cameras, no reporters, just a few chosen people. They reviewed old mission archives, searching for any record of objects or samples retrieved from the unknown sector. After hours of searching, they found something. A record from the very first exploration decades ago. It mentioned a small crystalline fragment collected from an uncharted planet. At the time it had been studied briefly and then stored away. Scientists said it emitted faint energy but showed no danger, so it was kept in a restricted lab. That fragment was still on Earth. When the scientist learned about it, he felt a chill run through his body. Could this small object be connected to the vanishing missions and the mysterious signals? He requested permission to examine it, and after some hesitation, they agreed. The fragment was kept in a sealed container deep underground. It looked like a piece of glass, clear and smooth. But when he brought it close to the signal receiver, the pulse on his instruments changed immediately. The reading spiked as if the fragment recognized the signal. It began to glow faintly, pulsing in perfect rhythm with the cosmic pattern. The light wasn't bright, but it carried warmth, almost like it was alive. He couldn't take his eyes off it. For the first time, he felt like he was standing at the edge of understanding something far beyond human knowledge. When the others saw the results, fear spread quickly. If the fragment truly responded to the cosmic pulse, then that meant the signal wasn't random. It was searching for something that belonged to it. And if the message, return what you took, was real, Earth had something it was never meant to keep. The scientists debated what to do. Some said to destroy the fragment, others said to send it back into space, but no one knew what might happen if they did. What if the object was part of something larger? What if returning it triggered an even bigger reaction? Outside the research centers, the world was already changing. The skies began to show unusual light waves that moved like water. Satellites detected bursts of energy coming from deep space, all focused toward Earth's direction. People all over the world reported seeing strange patterns at night, like threads of light stretching across the horizon, weaving for a few seconds and disappearing. Religious leaders called it a sign. Scientists called it data, but for ordinary people it was something they could feel. A vibration deep in the chest, like the heartbeat of the planet had synchronized with something far away. The scientist spent long nights studying the crystal. Each time he approached it, he heard faint whispers through the audio feed, gentle tones that almost formed words. Once, when he touched the outer layer of its container, the hum grew louder, and for a split second, an image flashed through his mind, and not a vision, but a feeling. A place filled with glowing shapes floating in still air as if light itself was alive. He pulled his hand back, trembling. The next morning he wrote in his journal, "This is not a rock. It's a memory." He began to wonder if the fragment wasn't simply an object but part of something living, maybe a consciousness that stretched across the stars. If that were true, then Earth hadn't taken a thing. It had taken a piece of someone. The government tried to keep everything hidden, but the signal kept spreading. Soon other countries detected it too. Some accused the Alliance of hiding the truth. Others threatened to launch their own missions to the same coordinates. The fear of what might come next grew every day. Then suddenly a new message appeared within the signal. This time it wasn't just 3 words. It was longer, more complex, but clear enough to understand. The translation said, "You are not separate." The memory must return. It wasn't a threat. It sounded more like sorrow or disappointment. When the message was released to a small circle of scientists, everyone felt the same thing. A deep quiet that words couldn't fill. They realized this was no ordinary discovery. The vanishings, the pulses, the shifting skies, and it was all connected. Humanity had touched something ancient and alive. something that existed far beyond the limits of time and space. The scientist stood before the fragment, its faint light reflecting in his eyes, and whispered softly, "What are you?" The fragment pulsed once in response, almost like an answer. Outside, the air was calm. But the world was holding its breath. People didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. The stars that once watched silently were no longer silent. And the planet beneath their feet seemed to know it too, trembling gently, waiting for the next sound, the next pulse, the next moment when the universe would speak again. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of human eyes in the vast dark stretch of space, a ripple spread outward, a faint vibration that carried both a question and a memory, moving through galaxies like a forgotten song returning home. The message, "You are not separate. The memory must return," spread quietly among the people who were allowed to read it. It was not shared with the public. Governments feared panic. Scientists feared misunderstanding. But those who saw it knew deep down that it carried more truth than any discovery they had ever made. The world above looked normal, yet something felt different. The air seemed heavier, as if filled with invisible tension. The oceans, the winds, the lights in the sky, everything behaved just slightly out of rhythm. It was too gentle to cause alarm, but strong enough to be noticed. People everywhere felt the same unease, like the planet was breathing in ways it hadn't before. Inside a quiet research station, the scientist who had been following the signal for months sat in front of the glowing crystal fragment. It pulsed faintly, keeping the same steady rhythm that echoed through the world. He had stopped trying to treat it like a simple object. It wasn't something to study anymore. It was something to listen to. For days he tried to understand what "the memory must return" truly meant. He thought about the vanished missions, about the explorers who had disappeared without a trace. Could they have found something more than just space dust and rocks? Maybe they had seen the same glow, heard the same hum, and realized too late what it really was. One night, when the lab was quiet and everyone else had gone home, he stayed behind. He dimmed the lights and turned on the receiver again. The hum from the crystal grew stronger, filling the room with a soft vibration. He closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him. For a moment it felt as if time itself slowed down. Then he saw it, not with his eyes but in his mind. A vision, or maybe a memory not his own. He saw a vast field of glowing structures, each one alive, breathing light. They were connected by invisible threads stretching far into the dark, pulsing together like one enormous heart. It was beautiful, peaceful, and ancient beyond words. He opened his eyes suddenly, gasping. The crystal had gone dark again, but the feeling stayed. He realized that what he saw might not have been a dream or imagination. Maybe the crystal had shared a piece of its memory with him, a glimpse of where it came from. And if that was true, then "the memory must return" wasn't a command. It was a plea. The next day he met with the Alliance's senior team. He explained what he had experienced and suggested that the fragment be returned to space. Not just launched away, but sent back to the coordinates where the 9th and 7th missions disappeared. Maybe that was where it belonged. His words caused a wave of arguments. Some officials said it was too risky, that sending anything into that sector might trigger another disappearance. Others believed ignoring the message could make things worse. The debate went on for hours. At last, they agreed to prepare a new mission, a return voyage. But this time, it wouldn't be a mission of exploration. It would be an act of apology. While preparations began, the world outside started noticing stronger changes. The sky shimmered at strange hours. Animals acted unpredictably. Compasses no longer pointed north. Still, there was no destruction, only signs, as if the planet itself was waiting for a decision. The scientist spent most of his days near the crystal, speaking softly to it even though he wasn't sure it could hear him. "We didn't mean to take you," he said once. "We just didn't understand." The light from the fragment flickered in response, almost as if it understood him. When the time came, the return mission was quietly announced to the world. The public was told it was a satellite repair launch, but those inside the Alliance knew its true purpose. The ship was small, unmanned, carrying only the crystal sealed inside a reinforced chamber. It was programmed to travel to the same coordinates as the vanished missions, release the object, and send back any data it could before losing contact. On the morning of the launch, the sky was unusually calm. The scientist watched from the control room as the rocket rose higher, leaving a silver trail against the blue. The hum in the lab changed slightly, softer now, almost gentle, like the planet itself was watching too. Hours later, as the ship moved beyond the orbit of the moon, strange readings appeared on the monitors. The magnetic field around the planet shifted once more, forming a perfect circle that expanded outward into space. The scientists stared in disbelief. It wasn't chaos or danger, it was order, precision, a shape too perfect to be random. The ship reached the targeted sector within a day. The cameras showed nothing but empty darkness. Then suddenly the data feed went wild. The sensors picked up energy waves beyond known physics. For a brief moment, a glowing structure appeared on the screen. Not a planet, not a star, but something vast and alive, made of light that moved like liquid. The control room fell silent. The crystal inside the ship began glowing brighter than ever before. It pulsed rapidly, then slowed, matching the same pattern that filled the room through the monitors. It was like two separated parts recognizing each other. Then with one final burst of light, the signal vanished. The ship was gone. Back on Earth, the hum stopped completely. Radios went silent. The strange lights in the sky faded. The magnetic field returned to normal. It was as if the planet exhaled, releasing a long-held breath. For days, the world stayed quiet. People felt lighter, though no one could explain why. The scientist sat alone, staring at the now dark instruments. Part of him was sad, but another part felt peace. Whatever that thing was out there, it had accepted the return. Maybe it wasn't angry, just waiting for what was lost to come home. Then one night, as he stood outside under the stars, his small receiver began to buzz softly again. He looked down and the signal showed a new pattern. It wasn't the old pulse. It was slower, warmer, and when translated, it formed a simple sequence that read, "We remember you." He stared at it for a long time, trying to understand. Did it mean they remembered humanity? Or that they remembered Earth as part of them? Maybe both. Maybe it was their way of saying thank you. The news of the strange calm spread quickly. The unusual lights in the sky never returned, and people slowly stopped worrying. Scientists continued studying the aftermath, but nothing harmful ever happened again. It was as if the entire incident had been a conversation, brief, mysterious, and deeply human. Months passed. The scientists still worked quietly, reviewing the data from the vanished missions. In one final transmission log from years ago, hidden deep inside old archives, he found something he had never noticed before. It was a short recording from the 7th mission, only a few seconds long, but in that recording, just before the signal disappeared, there was a faint sound, a hum, followed by a voice whispering softly, "They are not gone." He listened to it again and again, his heart heavy with wonder. Maybe the vanished missions hadn't been destroyed. Maybe they had crossed into whatever place that glowing field represented, a place beyond time, beyond understanding, part of the same vast living network that the crystal had belonged to. He didn't tell anyone about the recording. Some things, he thought, are better left as mysteries. Humanity had learned something far greater than proof of life beyond Earth. It had learned humility, that the universe was not a machine to conquer but a presence to respect. Sometimes, late at night, he would still feel the faint vibration through the ground, so soft that no one else would notice. He'd smile quietly, thinking maybe the Earth and the stars were still speaking, not in words but in understanding. The 9th and 7th missions were never found. Their names became symbols of curiosity and courage. Children studied them in schools. People looked up at the stars again, not with fear this time, but with gentle awe. And whenever the wind blew across the empty observatories, carrying that faint whispering hum, the scientist would close his eyes and whisper back, "We remember you too." Far away, somewhere beyond human reach, a glow moved slowly through the endless dark, calm, peaceful, and alive. The universe had listened. The memory had returned. Months passed after the return mission, and Earth seemed peaceful again. The strange lights were gone, the winds were calm, and for the first time in a long while, people started to sleep without fear of the unknown. But peace had a strange silence to it, a silence that carried a question no one could answer. What really happened out there? The scientist who had led the return mission was still haunted by the last message, "We remember you." Every time he read those words, he felt both comfort and unease. If they remembered humanity, did that mean they were watching? listening, waiting for something else. He had spent so many years studying signals, data, and patterns. But now his focus had shifted. He didn't want to study anymore. He wanted to understand, not through machines, but through feeling. Something deep inside him believed that the Earth itself had been trying to speak to its people all along. They just never knew how to listen. At night, when everyone left the observatory, he would sit alone under the glass dome looking at the stars. The hum was gone, but sometimes he thought he could still sense it in the quiet. A faint rhythm that wasn't sound, but more like a pulse. The heartbeat of the world. The world governments, however, were restless. Even though everything seemed calm, they feared that silence might not last. They began forming new secret councils, talking about building defense systems and advanced space detectors. Some believed that what had happened wasn't the end, but the beginning of something larger. The scientists disagreed. It wasn't an attack, he told them in one of the meetings. It was communication. Maybe even forgiveness. If we keep acting like the universe is our enemy, we'll lose whatever peace we've been given. But not everyone believed him. There were people who thought the signal had changed the planet in ways no one could see. They feared contamination, unseen radiation, or hidden control. Rumors spread online, saying the Earth was no longer the same, that humanity had become part of something bigger without realizing it. Most dismissed these ideas as nonsense, but a quiet tension began to grow across nations. It wasn't loud or chaotic. It was subtle, like a small crack in a wall that you don't notice until it's too late. Then one evening, an unexpected signal appeared again. It wasn't strong, just a faint whisper across multiple frequencies. The message was simple, repeating 3 times. The door is open. The world reacted with confusion. Was it coming from space? From deep within the Earth? No one could tell. The scientist was called immediately. He listened carefully, running the signal through every filter he had. Unlike before, there was no hum, no rhythm, just a calm, neutral tone. But somehow it still carried meaning. The door is open, he whispered to himself. What door? He tried to trace the source. The coordinates pointed toward the outer atmosphere, near the edge of where the return mission had crossed before losing contact. He realized something. Maybe the message wasn't a warning or an invitation. Maybe it was just a statement of fact. Something had been unlocked. For the next several days, faint lights appeared again near the poles. They weren't bright or alarming, just quiet streaks of silver moving gently in the sky. People thought they were auroras, but those who had seen the earlier events felt that same deep vibration in their chests. A reminder. The scientist gathered a small team. He didn't want to involve governments this time. He wanted to see for himself. They prepared a lightweight observation drone to fly into the polar region where the lights were strongest. When it reached the upper layers of the atmosphere, the images it sent back took everyone's breath away. There, just beyond the clouds, was something that looked like a crack in the air itself. Not a physical object, but a shimmering fold of light stretching wide across the sky. It wasn't dangerous. It didn't destroy or pull anything in. It just existed, like an opening between one reality and another. The scientist stared at the images for hours. The words came back to him. The door is open. He realized then what it might mean. Maybe when they returned the crystal, the connection between Earth and that other presence had stabilized. The door wasn't a threat. It was a bridge, a reminder that the universe had accepted the gesture. But humanity wasn't ready to understand such things without fear. Within days, governments began sending aircraft to monitor the area. Some even prepared to seal it off. They feared what might come through, or worse, what humanity might accidentally step into. The scientist tried to stop them. Don't interfere, he pleaded. It's not attacking us. It's just there, like a wound healing itself. If we interfere again, it might not forgive us a second time. No one listened. Military planes flew near the light fold, releasing signals to test it. For a while, nothing happened. But then one night, as the world watched from satellites, the fold flickered. A low, deep vibration passed through the Earth's magnetic field again. Power grids flickered in several cities. The oceans shifted slightly, causing tides to rise higher than usual, and then just as suddenly it stopped. The fold vanished, gone as if it had never existed. The lights disappeared. The skies returned to normal, but in that brief moment everyone felt it, a sense of being watched not with anger but with disappointment. After that night everything fell quiet once again. But the silence didn't bring peace this time. It brought reflection. People around the world started questioning everything: the nature of existence, the meaning of life, and the relationship between humanity and the universe. Religious leaders, scientists, and ordinary people all began to speak the same way, not with arrogance but with humility. The scientist, meanwhile, left the research center. He couldn't bear to see the data screens anymore. He traveled to the mountains, far away from noise and politics. There he built a small observatory using simple tools. Every night he looked at the stars, waiting, listening, hoping. One night, as he stood outside in the cold, the ground beneath him hummed softly. Not the same way as before, but gentler, like a distant song carried by the wind. He closed his eyes and smiled faintly. A thought came to him, unspoken but clear. The door was never out there. It was within. Maybe that was what the message meant all along. Humanity didn't need to travel across galaxies to connect with the greater universe. It only needed to remember, to live in balance, to feel the rhythm of the earth, and to respect what it could not control. Years passed. The scientist grew older. The world had changed. Technology advanced, but in a quieter, wiser way. People began living closer to nature again. Cities built green spaces and pollution levels dropped. It wasn't a perfect world, but it was a more thoughtful one. From time to time, small groups still searched for traces of the vanished missions. They never found the ships, but every once in a while, strange signals appeared, tiny pulses of light near the edge of the solar system, like echoes of voices saying, "We are still here." Whenever those signals appeared, the old scientist would look up at the night sky and whisper softly, "I know, we never forgot you." And somewhere far away beyond stars and silence, a faint glow would pulse back, slow, steady, alive. The galaxy was no longer trembling. It was listening. Years passed quietly. The world no longer spoke about the vanished missions as a mystery to solve, but as a lesson to remember. The strange events had changed people more than they realized. Humanity had learned to look at the stars not as territory, but as connection. The scientist had grown old. His hair had turned white and his hands were slower now, but his eyes still carried that same searching light. He lived in a small cabin far from the noise of the cities, surrounded by open skies and whispering winds. Every morning he would sit by the window with his cup of tea and watch the horizon, where the earth met the stars. Sometimes young visitors would come, students, researchers, travelers. They had all heard about the man who returned the memory. They wanted to hear his story, not through reports or textbooks, but from his own voice. He always began softly. "It wasn't me," he would say. "It was Earth. We just listened too late." Then he would tell them about the missions, the vanishing ships, the hum in the ground, and the message that said the memory must return. The visitors listened quietly, captivated by every word. But what made his story powerful wasn't the science. It was how he spoke. Calm, thoughtful, human. "The universe," he'd say, "doesn't shout. It whispers, but we only hear it when we finally stop making noise." After they left, he would walk to the small observatory he built behind his home. The telescope there wasn't large, but it was enough. He would look at the stars until the night wind grew cold. Sometimes he would whisper softly to the sky, "Are you still there?" And almost always, somewhere in the dark, a faint pulse of light would blink once, as if answering. It was never strong or regular, just a single flash, gentle but unmistakable. He never told anyone about it. It was his secret conversation with the universe. One evening, after a long day of clouds and rain, the sky suddenly cleared. The stars shone brighter than usual, and the air felt alive again. That same electric stillness that had once filled the world during the strange days of the missions. The old scientist felt a sudden pull inside him, a quiet calling. He went outside without his coat, feeling the cool air on his skin. The forest around him was silent. Even the crickets had stopped singing. He looked up, and for a brief moment, the sky seemed to open again, not with noise or fear, but with calm, shimmering light, like the world itself was remembering something ancient. He stood there, trembling slightly. Then he spoke aloud, his voice steady and filled with warmth. "We returned what we took. he said. "And you forgave us. Thank you." For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, high above, a ripple of soft light moved across the sky, not like lightning or an aurora, but more like a wave saying goodbye. It lasted only a moment, but he smiled, knowing it wasn't random. The next morning, when a young student came to visit, she found him sitting peacefully in his chair near the window, eyes closed, a gentle smile on his face. The telescope was still pointed at the stars. He had passed quietly in his sleep. The news of his passing spread slowly but touched deeply. Across the world, people lit small lights by their windows that night, a gesture of remembrance, not only for him, but for the lesson he had helped humanity learn. Over time, people began calling him the listener, not because he had heard the signal first, but because he had taught the world how to listen again. His writings, simple and poetic, were shared in schools and homes. They weren't about technology or science, but about understanding the connection between life, memory, and the rhythm of the universe. "The memory must return," one of his notes read, "does not mean giving something back. It means remembering who we are, part of a greater whole." Decades later, new explorers set out into space again. The technology had changed completely. Ships powered by light, guided by consciousness-based navigation that was inspired by his theories. But their purpose was not conquest or discovery. It was harmony. They didn't go to claim new worlds. They went to meet them. One of these missions, named the Listener's Journey, was the first to cross the outer edge of the solar system since the 9th and 7th missions vanished long ago. As they traveled through the dark, they picked up faint rhythmic pulses on their scanners. At first, the crew thought it was background radiation, but when they slowed the signal down, they heard a familiar pattern, a slow, steady hum. One of the younger crew members whispered, "It's the same rhythm that's in the old recordings." They amplified the sound. The hum became clearer, richer, almost musical. Then, out of nowhere, words began to form, not spoken, but transmitted through frequency modulation. The computer translated it automatically. "We have been waiting." The crew fell silent. They didn't respond immediately. They remembered what history had taught them. The universe was not to be rushed or treated like a machine. So they waited, just as the old scientist had done, listening carefully. After several minutes, the signal changed again. This time it said, "You remembered, the door remains." The crew exchanged glances. No one spoke. They simply let the message play until it faded. Then, without command or debate, the captain made a quiet decision. They turned off all active scans and powered down everything but life support. They drifted silently, letting the ship move naturally without interference. Hours passed. The darkness around them deepened. Then, in the distance, a faint glow appeared, the same gentle light described in the ancient logs. It was alive, moving like breath. It surrounded their ship but didn't touch it. Inside the glow, they could see shapes, not ships or beings, but vast networks of energy, pulsing together in harmony. The crew watched in awe. Some cried. It was not fear. It was recognition. They were seeing what the old scientist had described years ago, the great living field that connected everything. A soft vibration passed through the ship, and every system lit up briefly, not from power, but from resonance. The ship wasn't being attacked, it was being greeted. The computer screen flickered and a final translation appeared. "Welcome back, child of Earth." Then, as gently as it came, the light faded. The ship's sensors returned to normal. The hum stopped, but something deep inside every member of the crew had changed forever. They turned the ship around, heading back toward Earth. No one spoke during the journey home. There were no cheers, no excitement, just quiet peace. Each of them knew they had seen something beyond language, beyond science, beyond time. When they landed, they shared the recordings with the world. The message was clear and simple. Humanity had never been alone. The universe had always been, aware, not as a watcher but as a companion. waiting patiently for humans to mature enough to listen. The response from the world wasn't panic this time, it was gratitude. People gathered again just as they had years ago, but this time to celebrate understanding, not fear. Cities dimmed their lights for 1 hour so that everyone could look at the stars together. Children pointed upward, smiling, knowing those distant lights were not strangers anymore. In the quiet night that followed, the world seemed to hum again, faintly, warmly, like the heartbeat of something greater. The sound wasn't in the ground or the air. It was inside people's hearts, a shared rhythm that needed no translation. And far away, beyond the edges of galaxies, the great network of living light pulsed once more, steady and calm. It remembered the small blue planet that had once taken something it didn't understand, and had the humility to return it. The galaxy no longer trembled, it listened, it breathed, it remembered,